Hello friends, welcome to my channel. I'm Em and my books are everywhere. Today I'm going to be recapping my summer book bingo, and this was a challenge that was issued by Beautiful Minutia, and I'm going to link her announcement video down below. And I was able to black out the bingo board, so I'm very happy about that. There's a lot of books in that challenge, so I'm gonna, if there's a book that I have already mentioned in another video, I'm gonna be linking that video down below. So let's get started. So the first prompt is a place you'd like to visit, and I chose The Dog Across the Lake by Krista Davis to fill that prompt, and I did do a book review on that, so I will link that video below. The next prompt is a classic, and I read Rebecca, and I did talk about that in my July wrap-up, so I'll link that video below. The third prompt is a hot cover, and I read Silent Enemy by Lois Richer for that, and I did talk about that in the recap for the Keep Me in Suspense readathon, so I will link that video down below. The fourth prompt is a book in a series, and that was the Diva Goes Overboard by Krista Davis, and that's number 17 in the Domestic Diva series that she writes. And I'm going to just read you a little blurb here. For once, event planner Sophie Winston finds herself as a guest at a lavish engagement party, but things go horribly awry when the groom-to-be is fatally poisoned. So this was another fun, cozy mystery in the Domestic Diva series. I've read all the series up to the current book, and there are still more being written, so I can't wait for those. This Sophie Winston is the main character in the series, but there's lots of side characters that carry from book to book. And in this one features Natasha and her mom, where her mom was the one that was getting married. They are just such quirky characters that you love to read about in cozies, and the situations that Sophie finds herself in. Always kind of serious, but she just manages it all so well. And she is a caterer and she does events. So all of the books, they talk about food so much, all the food that you want to eat. They talk about these gorgeous places. The whole series takes place in Old Town Alexandria in Virginia, and the way it's described, it's just incredible. And of course, all of the food, and then there are recipes at the back of the books too. I love this series, and this was a great one. I gave this book 4 stars. The next prompt is a book that is joyful, and I chose A Murder is Announced by Agatha Christie for this, and I have talked about that in a couple of other videos. One of them was the Unicorn book tag, and I did Agatha Christie edition of that, and so I'll have that video linked below. The next prompt is A Second Chance, and this was a book that you gave a second chance to, and I'm going to kind of cheat on this one because I chose Persuasion by Jane Austen, and I have read that book twice before I read it this time, so really it was the third chance that I was giving it. I always had said that that was my least favorite Jane Austen book, but now that I've read it for this third time and have given it its second chance, it's not my least favorite anymore. It's not in my top favorites, but it's moved up a spot. So now it's number 5 of 6. And in this book, we follow Anne Elliot, who refused Wentworth 8 years before when he was just starting in his naval career. And now he has been promoted, he's made a fortune, he's considered a catch, and he's pretty much ignoring Anne. And the reason that she refused him was because she was persuaded that he wasn't or couldn't be suitable for her. So this still had a very slow start, but I would say probably about 5 or 6 chapters in, it started to get better, and I did end up enjoying it. I know there was a point I was reading it while I was a passenger in a car, and I turned to my cousin that was driving, and I was like, oh, Jane Austen, you know, she just, I think it was that Wentworth was writing a letter to Anne, and it's just like, oh my gosh, the letters that she has the men write are just incredible. And I was just like, oh my goodness. So I think that the whole middle to end of that book is what bumped it up to number 5 of 6 for me. So I do recommend it. Just that beginning part, it deals a lot with setting up the story, and it's just much slower and not as funny, not as quick to start into the action, I think, as her other books. And I gave Persuasion 4 stars. The next prompt is judge a book by its cover. And for this, I chose The Lady in the Attic by Tara Randel, and this is book 1 in the Annie's Attic Mysteries. And this is a book that I got through a subscription through Annie's Fiction. So I'll have the next book in the series coming to me sometime in September. This is the very first one, and we're introduced to Annie Dawson, and she has been taking care of her grandchildren while her daughter is recovering from surgery, and she finds out that her grandmother has passed away, so she has to leave Texas and go to Maine to kind of settle the grandmother's estate. And she gets there and she finds that the house is in disrepair. And since she's not really doing anything, she's retired, she's widowed, she thinks that she can stay there, get the repairs done, and then she can decide if she's going to sell the house or keep it and use it as like a summer home. And while she's there, she discovers something in the attic, and it's a whole mystery of who this person in this object that she found, who that person is, why the grandmother had this object up in the attic, and just the whole mystery surrounding that. So this is different from other cozy mysteries that I read because it wasn't a murder mystery. There wasn't a single murder in the whole book. I kept waiting for somebody to get murdered, but nobody did. But still, it was a great read. There's lots of small town events that happen in here. You know, the diner with the fabulous food, the festival that happens. In this case, it was a 4th of July festival. Lots of fun small town things, great setting. It's on the coast of Maine, so there was like lots of beach and coastal things also happening there. And then just the old house in the attic, and also a needlepoint store. I love crafting, and the grandmother was an excellent cross stitcher, and her works were sought after because she did sell them after she finished working them. And it was just a great mystery. So I gave this 4 stars. The next prompt was nonfiction. And for this, I chose Arthur, the Dog Who Crossed a Jungle to Find a Home by Mikael Lindnord. And this was a book that I read for my book club, and this was a true story. And if you have seen the movie or have heard of the movie Arthur the King, this is the story that movie was based on. And the book, I gave it 3 stars because of the dog. A lot of the book dealt with adventure racing more than the story of the dog, so that was a disappointment to me. I really was looking for more of the dog story. There was enough of the dog story in there though that, like I said, I did give it 3 stars. It was very interesting, the adventure racing part of it, but I was there for the dog, and because that was a smaller part of the book, I didn't get enough of the dog story. But it's a great story. The book was fine. 3 stars for me. It's a good book. The next prompt is a graphic novel or manga. And for that, I read Solo Leveling, and this is by Chugong, and this is book 1, so the story continues. In this, we follow Jin Woo Sung, and he's an E-rank hunter, and his job is to join other hunters to enter into these portal worlds and defeat the monsters and the boss, and then get out of the portal before the doors close. and he is just not great at it. So he is an E rank hunter, and that's like the lowest of the hunters, and he's even like the worst of those, to where he's called the weakest of them all, and that's his actual nickname, the weakest hunter. So this was this is the first type of book that I've read like this. This is a web novel that was published, and it was very interesting to me. The drawings were pretty good, and just like this, I mean, really, really cool stuff there. And I borrowed this from my nephew Benjamin, and he has other books in the series, so when I turn this back into him, then I will see if he'll let me borrow the next one, because I am interested to see how the adventure progresses. So something happens at the end of this book that I'm interested to see how that changes Jinwoo's life. So I gave this 4 stars. The next prompt is a library book, and I chose The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin for that prompt, and I did talk about that in my mid-year freakout tag video, so I will post that down below. The next prompt is a book with over 500 pages, and for that I chose Mistborn, and I did a whole vlog on that, and so I will link that down below. The next prompt was escapism, and for this I chose A Sicilian Romance by Anne Radcliffe. And I started this book for Jane Austen in July, but I didn't quite finish it in July. I finished it in August. There was so much drama in this book. So this is a Gothic romance, and it was the second book that was published by Anne Radcliffe. And it involves a marquis in Italy that has 2 daughters from his first marriage. He has a second wife. He also has a son. The son and the second wife all live in Naples, I believe. And the 2 daughters were kind of banished to stay in the country because the second wife was kind of jealous that they were beautiful, and she is known for her beauty, and she just kind of didn't want that comparison of those beautiful young ladies compared to herself. And she is especially upset when they all go back to the country to celebrate the son's coming of age. I believe it was his birthday, so he invites friends. One of his friends is a young count that the Marquis's second wife has had her eye on, and he kind of well, he wasn't interested in this older woman. And then when he meets the youngest daughter, instantly falls in love with her. So the Marquis's wife is very upset, and that just starts this whole thing where she lies and she schemes to make the life miserable for this young daughter. All kinds of things happen. Person that you thought was dead isn't. Well, that actually happened a lot. I think that happened like 3 or 4 times, different people, where you thought they were dead and then they ended up not being dead. There's runaway, elopement, and not who you would think were the runaways or the elopements. Person trapped in a dungeon. Gosh, what else? Mistaken identities, all kinds of stuff. Like, it was all in there. I did give this book 3 stars, but only because it like just kept going on and on and on and on, and I'm not always about the drama. So like up to a point, like it would have been a great story, I would have given it 4 stars, but just because it kept going on and just like stuff kept happening, I really didn't care for that. So 3 stars, but I'm glad I read it. Okay, and then for this free space, I did fill that in, and I put in there Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, and that is the 3rd book in the Mistborn series. So I'm not going to really talk about what it is, but I'll just say that it does wrap up Era 1 of Mistborn, and it does a great job to explain all of the things that you were conjecturing about in the first 2 books. It all comes together in that 3rd book, and I did give that book 4 stars. The next prompt is a booktube recommendation, And for that, I chose Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley, and I did talk about that in my Jane Austen July wrap-up, so I'll link that video below. The next prompt is a title that you kept putting off. And for that, I put The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I did talk about that in my July wrap-up, and that video is already linked below, so you can hear more of my thoughts about that book in there. The next prompt is a short story, and I read a collection of short stories called Murder Most Crafty, and this was edited by Maggie Bruce, and it has lots of writers that I've read others of their books. Here's the list of writers or authors, and the stories, some of them were linked to the series that they normally write. For instance, Monica Ferris, which I think is why I picked this book up in the first place. I've had this book for several years, but just hadn't gotten around to finishing the stories. So Monica Ferris writes I think it's called the Needlecraft Mysteries, and her main character is Betsy Devonshire, and she runs a needlework shop in Minnesota. And there was a story in here with all the characters from the series, but it was just a different kind of story. So normally the series it's a murder mystery series. In this, there was a theft that happened, and a teenager was accused of the theft, and so Betsy is trying to prove that he was innocent. But my problem with this collection is that just about every story in here had an abrupt ending. It had vague consequences or no consequences for the killer, because most of them are murder mysteries. And or there was one that was like a scam, where the scam artist was taking over identities and ID theft and stuff like that, and he didn't get caught, and that was just he went on to start scamming somebody else. And that's not what I'm into mysteries for. I'm into mysteries for the bad guy to get caught and justice to be served in one way or another, and I felt like pretty much in these it wasn't. So Murder Most Crafty, I'm still glad I read it so I don't feel like I'm missing out on another part of a story of a series that I've already read, but just not my favorite. So I did give this collection 3 stars because it was finely written. It was more me that I just didn't like the type of ending that these stories had than there was anything really wrong with them. So I think if you're a person that appreciates the bad guy got away with it, or just like a vague ending, leaving things to interpretation, this might be more for you. The next prompt is Friendship or Found Family. And for this, I talked about The Doll's House by Rumor Goden, and I have talked about that before. And that was also in my July wrap-up, so that video is already linked below. The next prompt is Vacation or Travel, and for this I chose Death in the Clouds by Agatha Christie. And this is a Poirot novel. Monsieur Poirot is in France, and he's traveling back to England. Is that right? He's somewhere, and he's traveling on an airplane. And when the plane lands, there's a woman that was on the plane, and she is dead. And so now the mystery is, how did she die, and who killed her? And it has to be somebody that was on the airplane. So Poirot enlists the help of Jane Grey, that was another passenger on the plane with him, to kind of help him go through the suspects and figure out why she was killed, Madame Giselle, and who the killer was. So this is a great Agatha Christie cozy mystery. This is a 4-star book for me. It's not one that I read as often as A Murder is Announced, which I've talked before. I read several times. I probably read it several times every year. I like it that much. And there's other Agatha Christie's that's the same. I reread them constantly. Death in the Clouds, I would say maybe once every 2 or 3 years I read. So it's still good, and I gave it 4 stars. So if you're just dipping your toes into Agatha Christie, and if you've already read all the big ones and want something else, I recommend this one. The next prompt is Cozy Mystery, and for this I read By Book or by Crook by Eva Gates, and I have talked about this. This is the Lighthouse Library Mysteries series, and I talked about this one also in my July wrap-up. The next prompt is Nature. So for this, I picked another cozy mystery because y'all know I love my cozy mysteries. And I picked Farm to Trouble by Amanda Flower. And Amanda Flower writes the Amish Candy Shop mystery series, which I highly recommend if you like cozies. There's several books in that series. There's a little pot-bellied pig that one of the characters owns in there, and it's just adorable. This mystery series is about Shiloh Bellamy, and she had been working in Los Angeles, and she had a very high-powered, high-paying job, and finds out that her family farm is in trouble, and so she leaves her job, cashes out her 401k, and her plan is to swoop back to her hometown and to save the family farm. When she gets there, she finds out that her dad has done a deal with a local business person to go in partnership to kind of save the farm, but the contract is not a great contract. The guy ends up dead. She's being blamed for it. She's the suspect, and now she has to investigate, find out who really did it so that she can save the farm and stay out of jail. This was a great, fun, cozy mystery, and I gave this one 4 stars. Also, I recommend don't listen to the audio for book 1 on this. I had a really hard time with the narrator. They changed the narrators for book 2, and I did listen to that one on audio. So if you like audiobooks and say, oh, this has an audiobook, I recommend just reading with your eyeballs, the first one, and then switching over to the audio after that. The next prompt is sci-fi or fantasy, and for this I filled in The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, and this is book 2 of the Mistborn series. And so all I'm going to say about this is when you defeat the enemy, that's just the beginning, because then you have to kind of settle matters, and that's what book 2 is about, settling matters of whoever were the victors of book 1. Now they have to deal with all the mess of the after in book 2. So this was great. I gave this 4 stars. Just the whole Mistborn series is amazing. I think I gave the first Mistborn book 5 stars, and the next 2 books, I think my emotions were just really high with that first one, but it is a 5-star read for me. And these next ones, I kind of had like settled into what Brandon Sanderson was doing, and I gave book 2 and 3 4 stars. The next prompt is a buzzy book, and for this I chose The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. When that book came out, like I kept hearing about it everywhere. It was prominently featured at the bookstore, so I consider that a buzzy book. And this is a story of Avery that inherits billions of dollars from a man that she doesn't know. And of course, his family is not happy about it. And it also turns out that he kind of left a game where if they figure out the clues, then they may be able to get more money, the family, or Avery could lose it all. So it was a very interesting book. I gave it 4 stars. There were a couple of things in there that I was not, too happy to see. It is a YA book though, and I am not a YA anymore. But for me, I enjoyed it, 4 stars. The next prompt is a reread, and for this I chose And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and I did talk about that in another video, the Unicorn Tag Agatha Christie editions, and I have linked that one down below. So you can find out more of my thoughts of that, although I think that is probably, as far as writing, as far as story and characters, probably Agatha Christie's best book. Not what I consider my favorite, but still I like it, and I do read it on the more often side. And then the next prompt is an author that's new to you. and I chose Barbara Cartland, who was very popular when I was younger, and she had been writing forever, and she wrote historical romances. And the one that I chose was called Elizabethan Lover. And surprisingly, with a title like that, it was actually clean. And it did involve pirates, well, privateers, and a young woman disguised as a boy, a beautiful woman that wants to be a nun. There was a lot of adventure and swashbuckling, peril, and some longing, but like I said, this was a clean romance. I did give this 3 stars because it's not typically the type of book that I read, and if it's definitely of its time as far as ideas and attitudes. So 3 stars for me. And then the final prompt is a book that's mentioned in another book. And for that, I chose Emma by Jane Austen. And that right now is tied with Pride and Prejudice as my favorite Jane Austen books. And you can hear more about that in my Jane Austen July wrap-up. I talked about that book. So 25 books, guys, throughout the summer that filled all the prompts in the graphic. I had a great time with this. I'm just getting started on another multi-month challenge like this. We'll see how that goes, but this one was great. Blackout bingo. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I will see you next time.